We are live.
Hi everyone, Monica Jazik here from Real Property Investments, bringing you our very first ever Real Property Report. This is a report we're going to bring to you 12 p.m. every Saturday, updating you with the latest news on the COVID-19 and featuring Real Property Investments experts to provide their insights and input on the latest happenings. So I'd like to introduce some of the real property investment experts that have come on today. We have Nick from Mortgage Wellness. Can you say hi, Nick?
Hey, Monica, thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure. Oops. And Danielle Connolly from Keller Williams. Danielle.
Hi, everybody. Great to see you.
And we have John Kramer of Kramer Legal Services.
Hi there, everybody.
And Michael Matthew of Michael D. Matthew Accountants.
Hello.
Thank you so much, guys, for coming on. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Things have been changing a lot with this COVID-19. I know that we have our wonderful minister and as well as our premier and even the president of the United States providing these updates, and they're doing a great job of providing these updates every day. And but it is kind of hard. Has any of you guys kind of found it hard to keep track of the changes and things going on? Because not all of us are just sitting around doing puzzles. I mean, there's a lot of people who are still working. There's people who are trying to configure their lives around for their kids, with their kids' schooling. And there's a lot of things that are still happening. So things are changing. They're very, very fluid. And our goal here really is to provide you, with a summary of these updates and have some professionals in the investment industry really to tell you their perspective of things going on. So some highlights this week that I've recorded here is that Canada now has surpassed more than 20,000 confirmed cases of the COVID-19. And, over almost 5,000 have now been recorded to date, and over 500 people have died. So the most disturbing news that I've kind of found, that happened was with Trudeau's message later on this week, I believe it was on Thursday, basically saying that this could be our new normal for the next 12 to 18 months. What did you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think it's very real. I joke that I kind of feel like a stockbroker lately. Like I'm having to, check in on stats from my industry every hour. Like rates literally change, not even every day anymore, but like 3 times a day in some circumstances. And just when we think we've figured things out, something else happens, like another emergency rate cut or something like that, and it reshifts everything. So I think there's an opportunity for us all to get stronger through this, and it's going to be built on creating a new routine out of this. That's my forecast. Well,
what is happening with these mortgage rates anyways? Because at one point, mortgage rates are dropping, and now I hear all of a sudden they're going up again.
It's one of the biggest forms of trickery, really. Variable rates were at one point, say like prime minus 1%. Prime comes down by 150 basis points. It was 3.95. It's currently 2.45. So prime comes all the way down, and now banks are offering prime plus variable rates. So, on a variable rate, like in a fixed rate, you lock into the fixed rate. In a variable rate, you lock into the discount. Prime minus 1, prime minus 0.5, prime plus 0.2. So, when prime was at 3.95, a really great discount would be prime minus 1, giving you 2.95, for example. Now, the people that took prime minus 1 at that, weeks ago, months ago, or years ago, are the ones that are benefiting because they're at 1.45, right? Prime being currently 2.45, less the 1% variance. But for new mortgage origination, prime has come down to 2.45 and the variance to prime has grown. So in most cases, I'll say it's in a prime plus situation. So the best variable rate, for example, that somebody might be able to get today is prime plus 0.2, which is still ultimately very good today. It's 2.65, for example. But when prime inevitably goes all the way back up and we're in a good market, pre-financial crisis, prime was 6%, 6.25 actually. So what's 6.25 plus 0.2? It's like 6.45. It's just not, it's not good, right? So, you know, variable rates, prime rate came down, discounts to variable rates basically evaporated, and fixed rates are higher than they once were before. So, you know, I think part of, you know, one of the biggest pieces of fake news is that interest rates have gone down. They are low for sure. Like, that is real news, is that interest rates are low, but, you know, the fact, or the news stating that they've tanked or hit a bottom is fake news.
Well, what do you think about, like, I understand, from my understanding, you know, we have to keep these interest rates low. I mean, now we're going into quote unquote a recession. This is what people are worrying about. The experts are saying things may never be the same. Do you think this is just the way it's going to be, or like low interest rates going to be the new norm?
Yeah, you know, like nothing has ultimately changed too much in our business in terms of rates. You know, prime has definitely gone down. The people that are benefiting from that are those within a, say, a home equity line of credit or a variable rate and a pre-existing variable rate. So those getting new variable rates, they're not that attractive, to be honest with you. But, you know, it sort of puts us in the same environment as before, meaning that money is still really cheap to borrow. Money was cheap to borrow a month ago, and it's cheap to borrow now. And if anything, it's going to get cheaper to borrow. You know, will we enter negative interest rates? You know, very common questions, obviously. But, you know, in general, interest rates, again, they were very low a month ago, sub 3%. They still remain sub 3%. And they're going to continue to be sub 3%. The only thing that's really changed in our business is how we go about business, right? So, like I mentioned in our last talk, like everything in that supply chain of money and everything in the supply chain of real estate has slowed down. It takes longer to get an appraisal. It takes longer to arrange things with your lawyer. It takes longer to get an approval. It takes longer to get your documents because, you know, maybe your company's HR department has slowed down. But as close to business as usual as the mortgage industry can get, it is.
Well, I mean, another problem too that people are worried about are people going to even be able to maintain their lifestyle without working. Now, Michael, over 5 million people or Canadians applied for the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit. So, and this is crazy because this is suggesting an unemployment rate of 25%. So what are your thoughts on the government's 3-point economic plan, and what are people's options in regards to the CERB and also for small business owners?
Well, as you mentioned, there's been a lot of interest in the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, or CERB benefit, and it started rolling out just this past week. Some people will have already received the money, and depending on how far back their period of loss of income dates, they can in fact have 2 payments by now. But the easiest thing to do is just to do a Google search for CERB or CERB benefit, and the application will come up. Regardless of whether you're an employee or self-employed, that's the place to start at this point, if you haven't already done so. And it will ask you a few questions, and it will take you into the right stream of how they want you to apply for things.
So what do you think about, are you surprised that so many Canadians took advantage of this CERB? And what do you think of that indicating that we are at a 25% unemployment rate? And how do you see that impacting everything?
Well, I'm not surprised so many participated. I'm frankly impressed the system has been able to handle the strain. They say that they can process 1 million claims a day through that portal. And the EI system would collapse under that. They just couldn't respond, which is why they're following everyone through the CERB benefit program at this point. As far as what it means, no one really knows, but it's going to be bad. I've heard some predictions that the economy will take to the fall to recover. And when they say fall, they mean fall of 2021. So we're talking about an 18-month cycle just to get back to where we started just, you know, a little over a month ago.
Well, just to summarize or give some more actual statistics, the economy lost a total of 1,011,000 jobs in March. 400,000 of these jobs alone were lost in Ontario. For us landlords, as well as, you know, people also who are self-employed people, this is a huge concern because none of us here on this panel knows really what this is going to mean for real estate, for the investment industry. Now, John, we were kind of advised even earlier, pretty much last month or a month and a half ago, that the landlord tenant board is not really making anything easier for us landlords if people are to go into default on their rents. Can you touch on some of that, please?
It's not just the landlord tenant board, Monica. It's the wheels of justice. Other than emergency family matters and some criminal matters, everything has come to a complete and grinding halt. All of the matters that I had, everything in my scope of practice has been suspended at least until June 1st. There was, it's not landlord tenant board, it's actually, one second here. The evictions that are being stopped are actually a result of an order from Chief Justice Jeffrey Morowitz. So it's not just landlord tenant board, it's all evictions of any kind really. And there's no date on when that's going to change. So in my communications with the landlord tenant board, which their processing center is even vacant right now, they're encouraging you to actually make your filings and your applications and whatnot so you get in line. There's going to be a big wave at some point in time when things resume, and if you're having tenant issues, you want to be in the front of that, not at the very back end of it. So if you do have, you know, your L1s to file your L2s for, you know, for your unpaid rent and those other things, you want to get in line absolutely and file those things. But there's no definite date when the courts are actually going to resume operation, which is a bit of a scary thing, not something I thought I would ever see. But here we are, everything is suspended. I heard, some of you probably know who Harry Fine is. He's a very well-respected paralegal, does, I think, entirely landlord tenant board stuff, previous board chair member. And he pointed out this week in a Zoom thing like this that some of the legal aid people he's been talking to said you're going to use the argument that your N4s and whatnot that you're serving now may not be effective because there was a regulation to the Emergency Management Civil Protection Act. There's a regulation that says any provision of any statute, regulation, rule, bylaw, or order of the government of Ontario establishing any period of time in which any step must be taken in any proceeding in Ontario. So this covers everything, not just landlord tenant board, including an intended proceeding, shall be subject to the discretion of the court, tribunal, or other decision maker responsible for the proceeding, and be suspended for the duration of the emergency, and suspension shall be retroactive until March 16th. So when you serve your N4 and you have that 2-week redemption period where they're supposed to pay their rent and get to stay, some people are arguing that that may or may not be an effective date, right? So we don't know. We won't know that till we actually go back to court, right? We're going to find that out the hard way. The first 2 people that managed to get a hearing date based on an L1 served after March 16th, and then 4 served after March 16th, and an L1 filed. I'll be in that list. I've filed a few already. We'll find out how the board's going to treat that, because although some of the legal aid counsel might go ahead and try to make that argument, it doesn't mean the board will accept it. Because at the end of the day, the board, I know it always seems slighted towards the tenants, and maybe it is a little bit, but they also understand that there's a lot of independent landlords out there that rely on this and they can't afford to not have any rent paid. Right? So I don't believe that's going to happen, but I also didn't believe 2 weeks ago they would ever shut the courts down. So you really never know.
And especially now saying 18 months, 12 to 18 months, for them to shut the courts down for 12 to 18 months. I mean, serving an N4 feels somewhat redundant in the sense you serve your N4 and then there's no follow-up allowed whatsoever.
Right. So what I've been telling landlords is, first of all, this didn't really pan out, I think, the way a lot of people did. There's a lot of noise made about a rent strike happening with some of the Park, whoever, people in Toronto, and everybody heard about that. And every landlord thought the tenants are not going to pay on the first. I think most of this group knows Richard from PNB. He reported that he received almost all of his rents the way he normally would. I saw another one from Rob Hilton at AG Secure that he got 99% of his rent. So it's not as bad as we thought, but I'm still getting the daily reports from somebody saying, well, my tenant is offering to pay me half. My tenant says they lost their job. They can't pay this month at all. There's, depending on what jurisdiction you're in, I do most of my stuff in Simcoe. There's a rent retention program. When I'm serving an N4, I'm serving it with the contact information for the rent retention program. They actually need that N4 to go in there and apply for money. They're allowed to apply for up to $2,200 once every 2 years. That applies to people who are not on any Ontario Works or Ontario Disability Support Program. There's a different program for them. And really, they shouldn't be affected by this anyways, right? But for people
Yeah, is that not illegal for them, not people who are on the Ontario Works and Ontario Support to really not pay rent? Isn't that pretty much illegal for them to do that?
No, in fact, even if you have direct deposit, they can call up any day and go ahead and have that money redirected back to themselves. And a lot of people did do that, from what I understand. But in terms of legality, no, it says shelter on it, but it's their money at the end of the day, and they can do whatever they want with it, right?
Hey, Monica, I was just going to say, like, John's point of those two property managers that received, 95 to 99% of their rent, like, that's what should be in the news right now. And John, I think you'll probably agree on that. Like, I think one of those posts, if I'm not mistaken, said 95%, and like 99% of the missing 5% had engaged in proactive conversations with their property manager about their intentions to pay or their inability to pay, meaning like nobody was just ghosting their landlord. Like everybody would either people had paid or people had made attempts to pay or people had made attempts to engage in a proactive conversation about paying. And I think that should be all over the media right now.
It should be. It should be. I'd like to even take this opportunity. Yeah, to say that we received that 98% of our rents we received.
Yeah.
I
And the
received
other ones
100%
are
of all my
waiting
rents this
for-
month.
You received how much?
I've received 100%. No one was late. I actually got rents 3 days early from everybody.
I did get some
and how
early
great is
payments
that?
as well.
Me too. I got one that was 2 days early. And I don't know if anybody follows Grant Cardone, but like one of the things that he did was like, he has thousands of units, but he tried to create like incentives for rent payments. So he'd say, hey, if you prepay the next 12 months in rent, I'll give you 2 months free. Or if you sign a 1-year lease, I'll give you 1 month free. 2-year lease, 2 months free. 3 months rent, 3 months free. And those are the kind of proactive conversations that should be getting media right now.
How would that hold up in Ontario,
I'm not sure how it would.
John?
They do free rent in Ontario. I have a really good friend of mine, Naran. He's actually a coach, or he sells Grant Cardone products. But he's been doing this for years. If you pay your rent on time for a year, you get a certain discount on your rent the following year. Now your rent stays the same because for profit and loss, they always want those numbers to be higher every year. So and he still does the rent increases, but on most of his properties, he does give a rent discount if you pay on time every month.
You can give a rent discount. You cannot charge interest or a penalty on late rent. So the only way to handle that to provide an incentive for somebody to pay the rent on time is to give them a discount for early payment. So back to what I was saying earlier is I am getting some trickling in of questions regarding people who have lost one income in the household and can't afford the full rent. So this tentatively, things will go back to some sort of normalcy on July 1st. So my response to the last landlord was the rent is actually $1,400 a month, or sorry, $1,400 a month. And it's actually the daughter in the household who lost her job. She's self-employed and had to close her doors and has nothing coming in at the moment. So they can pay $700 out of the $1,400. And my response is simply that, okay, well, serve them an N4 to let them know that if this isn't taken care of at some point in time in the future, they could potentially be evicted for it. And tenants do have to know that. There's absolutely no reason why any landlord would just discount rent for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 months and never want that money back. That's your money. You're entitled to it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But I said, even if you go to an eventual hearing with your N4 and your L1, the board member is likely to force you into a payment plan anyways. They're not going to make thousands of evictions for people who were generally good tenants in the past. And I wouldn't expect you to do that either. And in this particular situation, the landlord advises me that no, they're great tenants. So, okay, so we'll serve the N4, and then we're going to give them a payment plan and say that $700 a month is okay through April, May, June. And then starting on July 1st, we'll look at maybe the regular month's rent. And then for a period of a year after that, they just have to pay an extra $175 a month and they'll be caught up at the end of the year. No hearings, no going to a board, but they do have to understand. And right now, that at some point in time, if you don't pay all of the rent that's due, even if it takes you a year to do it, you're still going to end up being evicted.
Yeah, I think it's like I said, it sounds like we all have pretty good experiences so far. And I think good communication with your tenants is key. They're not public enemy number one, nor are landlords. We all really should get along. They are our clients, and and we want them to be happy and comfortable. And they should realize landlords really do have the best intention to provide great living accommodations. And the best way I think landlords could protect their tenants and plan for these things is to protect themselves. And to also tap into some of these offerings that we have with the mortgage deferral programs. Maybe you don't need it this month, but if people are getting $2,000 a month and your rents are $1,800 a month, and these people are still bringing in no income, these partial rent payments and communications and conversations about how that works might be the only option that your tenants have. And if you as a landlord can plan for that, so your bills aren't snowballing, because a lot of the times people don't realize most landlords are not multimillionaires that are just sitting on piles of money. We too are everyday people trying to grow our money, and we have bills to pay as well. So some people say they have reserves, they have savings. Yes, we should always have that for emergency situations. But also, I really do strongly believe landlords should be taking advantage of these mortgage payment deferrals for their investment properties in the event that they have, so they can better accommodate their tenants. What's everyone's thoughts on that?
I've been told that if we do the mortgage deferral, it's going to cost us quite a bit more in the end because it just gets tacked on and we're paying more interest. I'm not a mortgage broker by any means. Nick, you might be able to help me out on those numbers, but it kind of goes against our investment if we're just trying to push it back further. So
you'll be really surprised. Nick, did you want to give them the Scotia example?
I think it depends on your rate, and how far you are into your amortization term. So what you probably want to do is look at your actual amortization term that was provided to you when you actually closed your mortgage, see where you are, see how much of your payment is actually going to interest and how much is going to principal. And in some cases, if you have a slightly higher rate mortgage, like a private mortgage, you're going to, well, you couldn't defer those anyways, but you certainly don't want to miss a payment because you'll end up paying nothing but interest and you'll have a hard time catching up. And I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Nick. But...
Yeah. So here's here's sort of like our general scope of this. Okay. So we've literally fielded like thousands of these calls in the last 3 weeks. So, 4,000 closed clients in our database. And I think every single one of them has reached out. So we set up a specific assistance line. One of our employees is at home. That's all she's doing is answering these phone calls all day, every day. She's got a list of every lender on her wall. What I've found in these phone calls is that these clients just really want a listening ear. Like they want care, they want compassion, they want some answers, right? So in summary, I'll tell you sort of like at a high level, if people are deciding whether to buy groceries or pay their mortgage, it doesn't matter what the numbers look like. It just doesn't matter. Buy your groceries. Like that is it. Okay. So as a homeowner, if you're laid off, if you can't afford food, if you're having challenges, like, we had a great conversation at the beginning of this call, for example, you and I, Danielle, about all the wonderful things that we bought for our kids for Easter. If you're in a position to not be able to do that, then you should absolutely be seeking a deferral. There's no question. Now, if you have restricted money and you're like, I got money for the mortgage, but it might affect my finances moving forward. Those are the conversations where we're leaning towards, hey, listen, in the grand scheme of things, rates are still low. And I think everybody on this call can agree that, the pace of appreciation on a home will always outpace principal pay down on a home. Meaning, over the course of 5 years, you'll pay off $30,000 in principal. And over the course of 5 years, you'll probably make, $50,000 to $100,000 on your home. So to suspend the principal payments on your home temporarily, really in the grand scheme of things as well, if you're restricted for money, is not going to put you too far behind. The real conversation is exactly what we're referring to now. And I think Monica and Danielle and John, you all sort of touched on it, is how much more is it going to cost me on investment properties? And I think the same sort of like stress test needs to be applied on those properties to say, are my tenants paying? There was a really funny sort of, not funny, there was a humorous, I'll say, statement in our business that said, using a mortgage deferral when you don't need one is like parking in a handicap spot because it's closer to the store, right? So if you don't need it, don't use it. That's it, right? So as far as an investment property goes, I think a lot of people, entered into the last few weeks with that in mind, like, let's go ahead and defer, right? Because the anticipation before all these great stats that we just talked about was that tenants aren't going to pay. Danielle, you probably didn't expect 100% of your tenants to pay. I certainly didn't. Everybody else in the call, I'm sure they didn't either. I got all of my rents except for half a month from one tenant who said, hey, can I just postpone it until my assistance comes in? Whatever that assistance was. It could have been EI, it could have been the emergency response benefit. I'm not sure, but of course the answer was yes. So we've also gotten a lot of calls from people who are just looking to increase cash flow on their properties. Like, I don't really, I had a conversation last week and the gentleman said to me, I don't have a lot of cash flow in that account. I'm kind of like break even at that property. So if I postpone for 2 months, it could give me some really good, it would give me a balance in that account to like weather the storm. My question to him was, is there a storm right now? The answer is there's not a storm. All of his tenants paid their rent. So I think each individual circumstance will apply to this kind of scenario. Ultimately, if you need the benefit or if you need the deferral rather, it's there for you. If you're using it for strategic purposes, I would probably suggest that you don't, because like John mentioned, you will pay more. Like Danielle mentioned, it will cost you more. So those of us who are fortunate and grateful to be receiving rents, I think we just plug on as usual and know that a potential deferral is there as an emergency measure if cash flow gets disrupted or if, knock on wood, our incomes get disrupted.
Excellent.
No, I'm in agreement.
Long answer to a short question. I'm sorry.
A very educated answer. I like that answer.
Sorry.
It's just a shame to see that there's so many people out there right now taking advantage of the current situation that we're in. And I'm hoping this doesn't last forever, but like, I know people that are taking the $2,000 a month where they weren't working beforehand, but or I know realtors that are making a ton of money still. They're still selling 3 or 4 homes a month and they're taking the $2,000 a month.
I couldn't agree more. There's so many people, we've all heard them, where, some people within their business are saying, can you hold my commissions? I don't want to be paid any commissions during this time so I can receive the benefit. The answer should be no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not fair too. But think about it this way too. People might have Danielle, what are your thoughts on where this real estate industry is going? Like, how has the market been for you so far? Because now we're looking at this being our real estate agents, everyone's in isolation. It's harder to show homes. People are worried about a recession or a drop in market prices. Like, what have you seen so far?
So in the past 3 weeks, I've been busier than all of February. I've been in competition on anything under 400,000. I'm in competition, and I mean just 1 or 2 offers. I'm talking 5, 6, 7 offers on things. Had an offer on something that was 300,000. I think it went through for 360. The higher price range, they're still moving, but they're not moving as fast as they were because I think people are kind of just waiting to see. But anything under that 500,000 mark, it's flying off the shelves. But I think things are still busy. Like, I sold a commercial building last week in Niagara Falls. It was close to $800,000. I was in competition on that one as well. And the guy's going to open a pharmacy. Business will get back to normal. This too will pass. Things will happen. People that get scared now will be pushed back 18 months. But it's up to us right now to push forward and get through it because there's always growth. The best part about the market that's in right now is that all the realtors that were doing this part-time will go away, and the the 50% of realtors or mortgage brokers or whoever else is in the industry will still be around and we'll have more of the market share. So it's just
Totally
a matter
agree.
of playing out the storm. This too shall pass. Everything has its time, but it's just a matter of keep plugging away. I heard a statistic today that say if we had to make 30 phone calls to make one deal before, it's going to take us double. It's going to take us 60 phone calls to get that one deal. And the thing is, most people aren't willing to make the 60 phone calls for that one deal. So just a matter of seeing how much people are willing to push to get through it.
Absolutely. And I think we spoke about this before on our other webinars. You know, in most of our markets, there's still multiple offers. Things are still moving forward. And even though we don't have a crystal ball and we don't know what's happening, you know, we always, as investors, have to figure out how to work and help people in every situation. And as of now, it's pretty much maybe a little more difficult, but everything is going back to normal. Now, Danielle, you made an interesting point that this too shall pass. I understand another piece of news that was issued is that Ford recently, he passed that new law. Michael, what is that called? I have it written down here and I can't see. It's the launch of the Provincial Jobs and Recovery Committee in anticipation to help our Ontario's economy to recover after this. Do you have any thoughts on that, Michael?
I don't have any of those details, so I can't speak to that properly at this point.
I think in just what he said is that we'll never be put into the same position ever again. If it's going to cost us an extra nickel to make a product rather than getting in from China or getting in from the States, we will make it in-house. So that being said, our economy is going to go through the roof once this is done because we're going to have so much job growth because we're going to start making things in-house again. Yes, it might cost us a little bit more money, but our unemployment's going to be down. The best part of that is I live in Hamilton and Hamilton has Brantford and Niagara Falls on either side, and all it is factories. So the job growth in the greater Horseshoe area is going to be unreal. And we're handling it so well here in Ontario that anyone else that's like planning on immigrating or moving somewhere for jobs, it's just going to get better here. So I think we're in a really good scenario. Like, I think this is the perfect storm. Yeah, it's kind of shitty right now, but it's going to be, the outcome will be fantastic.
And any
Yeah.
economic downturn creates opportunities to buy, right? Things
Totally.
are on sale. So
That's
Well,
right.
it's our job to create the opportunities too, to look at it from a different perspective, not a panic perspective and a doom and gloom perspective, but from a more positive perspective. Like you are right, Danielle, too, the manufacturing companies are now making all the medical supplies. So this in turn, you know, will increase our economy. I also heard that the bars and lounges are going to have access to $40 billion in credit. So I know that our restaurants are suffering as well. And a lot of people are you know, supporting. I know every Friday night we'll order in sort of thing, you know, and they're trying to support this. But if these things in places like Hamilton, where you focus on, and, you know, Barrie and all of our key areas, they have a great, you know, sort of restaurant kind of nightlife type of industry there as well. It really makes it, you know, a strong part of the economics in those communities. The fact that they have some sort of safety net to recover from also is really reassuring. So we should probably end there on that positive note. It has been a crazy week, this bombshell that if we do not stay put and continue this isolation, that we're just kind of at the early beginning of this, and it's not going to resolve itself, at least Trudeau's saying till summer. We should be somewhat more controlled, but be prepared for 12 to 18 months. I think it scared a lot of people. And I think you being on this YouTube channel today, providing your expert perspective, I think it really kind of helps people say that it is somewhat of a controlled situation and it may not necessarily be all doom and gloom. So that being said, things are changing day by day. We are going to be providing the Real Property Report live every Saturday with our team of experts, and we'll be recapping developments throughout the week and providing a professional perspective from the investment industry. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Real Property Investments Wealth channel and our COVID-19 playlist will be updating webinars and information on a consistent basis to keep you current. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming on today. And everyone keep safe. We hope to see you next Saturday.
Thanks, Monica.
Thanks,
Bye.
Monica.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon. Stay safe.